Hello and welcome once again to White Lotus of Light conversational series. This is part two of my conversation with Mary Allison. And this is part of the masculine and the feminine series, although we did wander pretty far off the beaten path in part one. We talked about all sorts of cool mystical, esoteric, and woo-woo stuff, which is awesome, and I love it. In this second half, I think I'm gonna attempt, but I also want to let the conversation go where it goes, just like water wants to flow where it wants to flow. But in this part, I'm going to try and have us talk a little bit more about things like I really want to hear Mary Allison's take on the divine feminine, and maybe actually I think the infernal or dark feminine a bit more, just for a woman's perspective on that. And then I also want to try and circle back to, we didn't get too deeply into it in part one, just what Mary Allison thinks about what I call the dark trident of technology, the social media, online porn. We don't need to go too much in that one. That one's somewhat self-evident, and I talked about a lot in the other episode I did. And also just dating apps and any observations she has about those things, how they impact things, because I want to both have a lofty perspective of all the spiritual driving forces that, in my opinion, are the causative layer, as opposed to the more material 3D experiential or consequence like effect layer of reality. We move primarily in that layer of reality, and so I do want to touch on that. And also there might be some viewers who were interested in that aspect of that series, and I really do want to hear Mary Allison's thoughts on it. And so Mary Allison, do you want to address the just to sort of tie up part one? Is there anything you want to say? And if not, then we can just move right on. Is there anything you want to say about those three technological things, like specifically each one, like online porn and the impact that has on men and women from a female point of view, social media and the impact that has on men and women from a female point of view, and dating apps, if you have any? I don't know how familiar you are with that experientially, but you probably know people at least who have had that, and what your thoughts are, how that influences male and female relating and psychology and experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I don't think we hit the dating apps earlier, so that's good to hit that real quick. Um, the dating apps are an interesting thing, and again, it comes back to this notion that everyone's lonely these days. And I say this because I've worked with clients for 7 years, and that's the most common theme that comes into the sessions, is being lonely. And it's ironic that loneliness is such a commonality. That doesn't really seem to make sense on a mental level. But in terms of dating apps, I just feel like they are systemically teaching people to view one another as you would view like food, an object of your affection, an object of lust, instead of viewing someone as an object of source, an object that is not an object, but a soul. Though we have the object that is the human body that we're in, we have such a sentience to us. And dating apps have this way of pulling us away from that sentience. So it's almost like a psychopathic culture is being groomed. And I'm not saying that that's going to be what happens in totality, but yeah, there's a certain psychopathy that's emerging from that. And if you look at the science of psychopathy or sociopathy, it is essentially a way for the brain to deeply protect itself. So what better way to protect yourself than to not even use the amygdala and to not ever need to feel emotion? I mean, that's one way to survive in a technological world. And so these dating apps are grooming people into that. And I'm not saying that it's grooming everyone. I understand that some people like to use them sometimes, and no shame or judgment at all. That's great. But we must be aware of how these tools groom us, just as social media is grooming us to be overreactive. The dating websites are almost grooming us to be underreactive, to just have no emotionality or sentience tied to relating anymore. Whereas the social media sites want us to be overreactive. And so you'll notice that every tool that's used to sort of pervert human kinds and tensions is used in a dualistic manner. So let's have them be overreactive in this one area, and then let's have them be way too casual in this area. And if you have that deep of a duality within your own psyche, you become schismed, you become fractured. That's what trauma is. It's a fracturing of the mind. So both of these, I think, are used together. And then you could bring in porn, of course. Well, porn is a way to desensitize the mind as well, and get the body hooked on dopamine and certain adrenal hormones. So that's a way to desensitize, but to also sort of create a obscure version of what sex should be. Like, I think it's a way to make sex appear to be violent in a very normal way. I don't know if I am really saying that right, but I have a lot of male friends who have come to me again and again and again complaining that so many females are wanting to be like choked and hurt in a brutal way during sex. And even saying this, I'm aware that people could get mad at me and be like, well, it's our right to choose what we want to experience during sex. Of course it is. And it's my right to speak about my opinion on it. So, like, that's not really that healthy. And I know that that would rub people the wrong way. I honestly don't care at this point. I think this whole like overreaction culture is going to die off anyways. And people are going to realize that they've been groomed by these tools that you mentioned, social media, porn, dating websites, to be not in their best of alignment. And so that's just a few ideas there, but I'm sure there's so many other ideas other people have, and we could go so much farther into it and discussing.
That's fantastic. I loved everything you said. I'm gonna try and do a super distilled version of what I talked about in part one. Viewers can go back and, this stands on its own, but go back and watch that with Roderick Z. It's the first episode in this series, and then this is the episode 2 with trying to get more of the female perspective from someone I feel I feel Roderick Z really holds that divine masculine energy really well, and I feel that Mary Allison really holds, and I like to think I hold the divine masculine energy quite well. And I wanted to bring Mary Allison in because I want the female perspective on all this stuff. But I want to real quick encapsulate for you what I said about each of those 3 things and get your reaction to my thoughts on it, just because I'm curious. I'll start with porn. I have revealed in the past that, in part because of trauma I suffered when I was a child, I was addicted to porn for a long time. I'm incredibly fortunate that I grew up. I'm 46. I grew up in an age where hardcore pornography was very difficult to come by. It was actually around the time that I turned 18. It started to be more prolific in the mid-90s, and you were able to get it as an 18-year-old without a whole lot of effort. It was gross. You had to go to gross shops, blah, blah, blah. But I'm so incredibly grateful for the degree of difficulty that was required in order to get your hands on it, because had it been easier, I'm sure I would have gotten addicted to it much, much sooner. Once online streaming porn came along, when I was less aware, I was like, wow, this is the greatest thing ever, not realizing what an insane nightmare it was, not understanding the impact it had on me, not understanding that it wasn't actually quenching. I happen to have an incredibly high sex drive, and it would take the edge off, and it would also, I realized, take the edge off my trauma that I hadn't worked through. When my trauma would start to build up, I would almost like go like for a pacifier for porn, right? To soothe myself, actually. But then afterwards, it's like when you drink a soda that has corn syrup in it. Tastes real sweet on the way in, and then you go, on the aftertaste, and you want more, almost to wash out the aftertaste. And then if you keep consuming it, you just end up feeling really sick. And I would feel really disgusted energetically, but my spiritual awakening didn't really happen until late in the year 2000. So for 6 years in there, that hadn't really come into the online thing. It was still hard to get. And so fortunately, when the online came in, I was more on the spiritual journey. And so I was able to have a certain degree of distance, even though I was indulging very much for a very long time, decades, literally, in pornography. And it got worse the more available it became. And my own things that I like I found myself being more attracted to more severe stuff. And they say it's because you have to have some kind of greater or different stimulation in order to have it still be fulfilling. It's like taking more cocaine. You take a little tiny line, but then you need a bigger line, kind of thing. And there was a lot of stuff I never got into, and I'm super grateful for that, and stuff that I always hated and disgusted me, and I'm super grateful for that. But you know, it still goes through my mind when I look at a beautiful woman. It's still porn style scenarios of sex go through my mind when that's not really what I want at the deepest level. That doesn't mean you can't have really passionate sex, but
Totally.
that more darker energy that you're talking about. I actually had an ex to where we just didn't work because she wanted me to be so violent with her. And I did it one time, and I felt so disgusted with myself afterwards. She was like, "That was great." And I was like, I was traumatized by what I had done. I was horrified by it. And this kind of aspect of porn, I feel, is discussed a lot. Men being violent towards women, women starting to want that violence, that kind of BDSM kind of stuff. But one of the things I talk about in part one, and I think is really important to get out there and is worth reiterating, is porn is more destructive for men than it is for women. What? How can that be? Women are the victims in the porn. Women are the ones exploited and treated like shit by porn. First of all, that is true, but there's also gay porn. And almost all the worst, most horrible, nasty, over-the-top stuff that's in straight porn originated in gay porn, apparently. I've had a number of gay friends who've told me about this kind of stuff, and that they're like, men that were gay, but they would sometimes watch straight porn for whatever reason. First of all, almost all straight male porn stars have to do gay porn as a gateway in order to do straight porn, because just as in straight porn, they constantly churn through and fresh meat. It's horrible, but that's, you know, the term they use. Gay porn, it's the male body that's commodified, and therefore they need a constant supply of new. And they will give men who have the attributes they want in gay porn, which also translate well into straight porn, you know, muscular, big penis, all that kind of stuff. They'll say, if you want to be with women in porn, you have to first be with men. Because the producers of porn, which will produce usually both, make far more money off the males, 10 times the money or 50 times the money off a male appearing in gay porn than they will in straight porn. And since there's less gay men than there are straight men, they had to figure out a way to get more men into porn. And they found that one of the levers they could use was be like, oh, you can be with all these women in straight porn, but you have to do a certain amount of gay porn. It's similar to the way that you'll see really great actors like Liam Neeson will be in really shitty action movies, and people are like, why would this person degrade themselves? Well, because that shitty action movie makes more money. It has a broader audience. And so you have to do those crappy movies in order to do the movies that are more artistic. You have to do X number of very profitable movies, and then Hollywood will give the green light to your artistic project. So it's an analogy, and it's kind of a clumsy one, but it's somewhat of a similar thing. And so once you realize that men are being exploited in porn more than it appears like, because so many of them are in gay porn, and gay porn is apparently just absolutely atrocious and hyper exploitive and hyper devastating for the men involved in that, you start to see, okay, well, then there's just extreme exploitation going on. But the reason that I say that porn is worse for men is because of this. When men are watching porn, they're doing something that historically would have only happened to defeated men who are defeated in war. That is watching other men have sex with women. That would, in ancient times, that would basically only happen when you were either at an orgy or you were watching enemy soldiers rape your women. And so the epigenetics of seeing that is that you are put into a super ultra beta male isn't even strong enough, an omega male status where you have no status. And you're watching usually a very big muscular man with a huge penis. So you're going to feel diminished by all of that. Be with women and be with lots of women. And it reinforces this whole thing of only Chads and Tyrones. That's the names they have for these player guys, you know, usually the very muscular player guys, that only those guys get women. So it's super emasculating to men on a whole host of levels. Plus they get hooked on the dopamine and they start to hate women. They start to feed into this whole idea of women are only out for money because they recognize these women are being paid money, you know, all this kind of stuff. I think it's tremendously devastating to the male psyche I am not saying it's not to women. First of all, porn is primarily targeted at men for the consumer. More and more women watch it. And you talked about the way that it's starting to impact women more and more as women watch it more and more and more and more, and as women interact more and more with men who watch it. But then there's also a weird phenomenon that never happened before. And that is there's 20-year-old guys who, much like you're talking about vibrator and women who couldn't be stimulated by a man anymore and needed a machine to stimulate them. Similarly, men who are in their 20s can't maintain or even get an erection because they started watching porn when their brain was still forming. And so for the first time in history, there's males who are in their 20s who have less sexual function than I do as a man in my mid 40s because they've been devastated by this porn. So I feel like porn is way worse for men. And I'm not trying to say like porn is like some laudable, wonderful thing for women. Certainly it is not. As someone who's a recovering porn addict, I hate it. I hate everything about it. I hate what it, I feel so sorry for all the women and the men, especially the men who are exclusively in gay porn, but the men who are in gay porn and the women who are in straight porn, I feel devastated for them. It's so horrible. But I still think it's worse for the male psyche, and it puts men in this just really weakened psychological state. And so I've been talking for a bit there. I'm just curious, and I know I was very graphic there, and I apologize. It's hard to discuss that subject without being.
No,
so what are your thoughts on what I just shared? And had you considered any of that?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't know the relationship between men seeing the woman raped and men watching porn. That makes a lot of sense, and it's very sad to hear of that. And I haven't just explored that as much as you have, so thank you for sharing that. And all I can add in is I don't like watch porn, but I've met a lot of females who have said that they prefer female to female porn because they've said it's more gentle. And I think that just says a lot in itself. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, if you need to go to that, even if you're not interested in that, but you prefer that because it's more gentle, then the entire porn industry is obviously incredibly corrupt. And knowing that Pornhub has had its experiences with allowing like children into that world, I mean, it's just clearly corrupt. So I'm a fascinated listener more about this. But I'm really glad you're bringing it up because I also am glad that you've shared that you've been into porn before, because I mean, really so many people have, and it's just so good to be able to be open about that. Like, there's no shame in regards to that. If anything, shame on the systems that attempted to groom young children into relying on them to masturbate, and shame on the public schools that allow it into their field. Like, it wasn't that long ago that I was in high school, only about 10 years ago, and like kids were watching porn on the bus, and it was just such an easy thing to bring into your psyche.
Really?
So yeah, oh
I
yeah, I
have
mean,
a
it was just,
teenage son,
yeah.
so this is horrifying. I talk to him openly about it all the time, talk about my addiction, what it did to me, talk about how it's so much worse for young men, and about how it will
Yeah.
destroy him and he won't be able to have good sexual encounters with women if he indulges in that. And it scares me so much. It scares me so much. Like I just worry about it so much. Like getting a little emotional. I worry so much about that getting its hooks into my son. I hate it so much. I would ban it if I could. I would wave a wand and just delete it all from the world if I possibly could. Yeah, and I mean, I'm still in a stage of recovery to where, like I'll be on Facebook and there'll be these things called clean porn memes where they take porn and they make it so you can't. So it's not pornographic, so it gets past the standards. But if you're someone who's watched porn, you'll recognize that it's a porn scenario, and that's sometimes kind of the joke. Like it'll be there'll be like a woman surrounded by snakes or whatever, but it's that someone drew cartoon snakes over the penis of the whatever men who are in it, whatever. So that gets around the community standards. But if you're someone who is a recovering addict like myself, when I see an image like that, I feel that I've defeated it finally after literally trying the past probably 15 years to kick it. I finally was able to, with help of Angelic Magick, was finally what helped me dissolve what I needed to dissolve within myself. And it also was preventing me from healing around some of my trauma, because it was acting almost as a shield that to prevent me to go deeper and to get down to that trauma where I could heal it. But uh if I see like a female porn star, like the other day I saw this woman on someone put up a woman, and it kind of hinted in the context of whatever the meme was that this woman was in porn, but I was like, but it wasn't entirely clear, and I was like, man, that woman looks so familiar. She looks so familiar. Why does this woman look so familiar to me? And then it hit me that she was a porn star, and I was just like, like I feel such like I don't feel a ton of shame about it anymore. Obviously, I had to overcome a lot of shame to even talk about it, because I was very shamed about it. Like both of my parents caught or found my porn stash when I was younger, and my dad righteously destroyed it. And my mother was more like, we should have a conversation about it. Neither one of them super helped a ton, but like, I get it. I don't know what I would do if I found that with my son, like I'm so scared of that. I can't even tell you. Like, I'm so like, please, like, let him get through. Both his mom and I are pretty good about helping him. He doesn't have the trauma history that I had, so I'm pretty sure he'll be okay. But the ubiquitous nature of it, I mean, that's the other thing. It's like, you can't go online and be like, click on Heroin Hub and they'll deliver heroin right to your door. You have to go and find a heroin dealer. You have to go and find a cocaine dealer or whatever. Even for weed, you have to, I guess now there is actually weed delivery, but there would be a delay. Like, you'd have a chance to go, never mind, I found the strength again to recover. But everywhere you go, if you have a phone, it's right there. It's right there. And so you can't get away from the temptation, and it takes a much higher, I feel, degree of mastery. I also was addicted to marijuana, and I find that that's way easier to get control of. Way easier. I haven't ever been addicted to cigarettes or hard drugs, so I don't know, but it's just so pernicious, and it's so pervasive, and it's really infected our culture. It used to be, in the 90s when I first got into it, it was considered bad. It was considered low class. It was considered disgusting. Like, sure, men would talk about it kind of like, hee hee, in secret off to the side or whatever, but it was considered like, don't talk about it. And now it's just like, people are like, oh yeah, I watch porn all the time. It's great. Men and women both. It's just like, and it's a testament to the way it's infected our culture.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I believe on the dark web you can get certain things, certain strains of drugs delivered to your door.
Right.
And usually what's on the dark web eventually is on the normal web. So like even the children being involved in the PORN, I'm just trying to be careful with the algorithms that I don't say too many words. But yeah, even with that began on the dark web, and then it transferred to even Pornhub. So I just want to make that point, and it's really powerful what you just said, because it is so accessible. The addictions, it's so accessible. And I also want to throw in that no matter how far you've gone in your life, like, you can always find your soul again. I was like raped a ton as a child, and my biggest healing realization is that nothing ever can take me away from my spirit. And so I just want to say that to anyone, if they're like, stuck in an addiction cycle with porn or anything like that, you can always find your soul again. So I think that's important for us to remember. And unfortunately, people have shaming responses when they don't know how to deal with things. And shame never actually heals. That's one thing I've learned in my work. It never helps anyone. There's very small incremental moments in time where you should feel shame. Like, if I hit a squirrel like a couple months ago when I was driving, I felt some shame that day. Like, that really sucks that I took that squirrel's life. And of course I didn't intend it, but I still felt some guilt. But there's just little bitty moments in reality where, like, oh, the shame is there, you feel it, and then you make the correction based off of that. And you, like, don't hit the squirrel next time, be better at not hitting squirrels. So there's just so many different ways for us to heal. And I've also noticed that a lot of shame that we feel, it's not real, it's synthetic. So it's shame passed down from different generations, and it's used as a chokehold to keep people stuck in a stagnating way. And that's important to know, because not only does porn lock people into this sense of needing to be with their screen and be with these fantasy experiences that I don't even know if I'd call them fantasy, because it's not like it's sci-fi. It's like just someone hammering someone. So porn is that.
Sorry, that's just funny. Go ahead.
And then so there's that, right? And then there's oh wait, what was I talking about? I forgot, because I was laughing at that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to derail you. Like,
No,
so
because I thought it was funny
kind
too.
of have this innocent energy, and you were like hammering, and so I just had to laugh. It's funny.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, I
So
had like a point and then I forgot it.
you were
But
talking
yeah.
about shame never. You were talking about
Mhm.
shame never is healing. You said that like
Yes.
corrective action by feeling shame. Do you remember?
Um, oh wait, let me just go back. Okay.
Having their
And then they're hammering each other. Oh, I remember. Okay. So not only is porn, dark in the ways that you had described, through men watching things that they might not have been meant to watch before. Um, but and females as well. But porn is dark in the sense that it will give you a feeling of shame, whether you're conscious of it or unconscious. And anything that consistently drives shame into your psyche is poison. There's natural shame that you should feel if you messed up, and if you messed up, fix it and move on. But when you have something that's trying to drive that shame into your subconscious, that is manipulation at its finest. All manipulators use shame to attempt to control their puppets. And so, unfortunately, porn is just a tool to create puppets so it can control them. And that's not to say that if you're a puppet, that you can't transcend and find your soul. I've been a puppet before to many people. Many of us have, and that's something we carry in solidarity with one another. So I just wanted to add that point as well, because it's such a shameful energy that people don't really discuss, probably because they're embarrassed, because shame provokes embarrassment and it shouldn't. We should all be more than willing to talk about the shameful aspects of our lives, because that's something we all share as humans, is that we felt shame at one point or another.
Wow, that's beautiful, and that's very well put. And it absolutely, I felt shame almost every time, after I'd climax, like right on the heels of that,
Yeah.
shame. And
Mhm.
wow, that's so well said. Thank you so much. So what about so one of the things I talk about with social media, that social media creates a natural enmity between men and women because of the principle of the direct message.
Mhm.
So a woman puts up a picture on Facebook or Instagram, and it might just be a totally reasonable picture, or maybe that day she wants a little validation. She wants a little validation about her looks, and maybe she puts up something a little more risque, a little more cleavage, maybe bent over slightly, looking over her shoulder, showing off her butt a bit, or her legs, or whatever, her lips, or whatever she thinks her feature that she wants attention brought to. Her hair is like super on point, whatever it is. And then, especially if a woman puts it in a story, when you put it in a story, a picture that, it's the so-called thirst trap picture, men are going to DM you.
Mhm.
They're going to DM you. Men are going to DM you whether or not you put up these kind of pictures, likely if you're a younger woman. But I'm friends with a woman who's a boomer, and she talked about unsolicited dick pics that she's received from boomer men, which completely blew my mind. I didn't think that was possible. I thought boomers had a little more class than that, and that men in that age would have more of a sense, sorry to reverse what you just said, but more of a sense of shame or dignity, I guess, really, actually, to not do that kind of thing. So there's that dynamic, but especially younger, more beautiful women, right, for obvious biological reasons, if they put up those kind of pictures, men are going to DM them, and they're going to get a lot of direct messages. If they have a large amount of friends and they put up almost any kind of picture, and I'm sure you experience this, you're a beautiful young woman. If you put up any kind of picture that is even just normal, just a reasonable picture, like a yearbook photo that you would have put up, kind of the equivalent of that. But if you put up one that's at all risky, you're just going to get flooded with DMs. And you're going to naturally, you may or may not respond to all of them. Usually women can't because they get totally overwhelmed. And what it does is men would never approach. If I saw a woman walking down the street in a bikini, for example, I probably wouldn't approach her for a variety of reasons. But let's say for whatever reason that woman's energy really spoke to me. And I was just like, wow, not only am I seeing a lot of skin and I'm getting naturally turned on, but there's something very compelling about this woman. I probably still wouldn't approach her unless unless I just felt this tremendous soul pull. If I felt like an intuitive reason to go over there, I wouldn't. But I would probably never go. Let's say I was at a park and a woman, this is more realistic, a woman was sunbathing in a bikini. I almost certainly wouldn't go up and talk to her, right? Like, I would actually feel more awkward talking to a woman who was in a bikini than a woman who was slightly more modestly dressed. I actually do want to work on maybe not cold approaching, but if a woman shows interest, I'm single right now. If a woman shows interest, I want to approach her in an actual natural organic setting rather than via online. But my point is that there's no way that these guys who weigh 250 pounds at 5'7" and with like a bad neck beard, whatever, and a bunch of Cheeto crumbs all over them, there's no way that guy's going and approaching that woman because he knows he will get shot down and he'll feel that shame and embarrassment if he actually tries to approach that woman that he knows is out of his frickin' league. And even regular guys who maybe that woman, they perceive her to be in his league, that he has a shot, they're still not super likely to approach because of the risk of it. And even guys who are more like, I'm an elite male, blah, blah, they may or may not approach. They probably aren't going to approach there. The exact opposite is true online. Men feel like the potential reward is high and the risk is extremely low. And men can then employ much more easily the age-old shotgun method of, I'm going to approach as many women as possible. Like, it's super easy online and it's super whatever. I'll be honest, I've approached women. Women will put up a sexy picture or even like a regular picture where she looks really beautiful and I will slide into her DMs. I try and be upfront and honest with my interest and hey, I don't try and say whatever kind of like nonsense sidle up next to her, but I too will approach it. It's hard not to because there's this certain invitation energy to it. And I'm not blaming women there. I'm just saying the way you perceive that as a male. And so women get such tremendous, extraordinary amounts of attention that they never would have gotten at any other era in human history, that even, and I'm not trying to be a dick about this, but even a woman of average level of beauty, especially if she's younger, right, and so fertile, she's going to get just an extraordinary amount of attention, extraordinary. And that begins to have women have this warped, narcissistic sense of self, especially if they are more beautiful and especially if they are really trying to get that attention. They can get just this super huge ego of, wow, I am the empress of the world. I can at any time have any man I want. And of course, those men, most of them are responding from a sexual lust-based place and not a desire for true intimacy and connection. And it's easy to make that mistake between those two, because in olden times when a man approached, usually it would be going towards some kind of connection. But with the media digital layer, it's not about connection. It's about lust. Not always. The good connections can come from the digital era. I've been married from women I've met online, actually. Both of my wives, I met one through Craigslist for a roommate and the other one on a dating app even. But the point is that women start getting this warped sense and men experience the opposite. Men experience this of, they go and they approach a woman and that man might have had a real shot had he approached her in real life 20 years ago. But now this woman's thinking, it's that commodification that as much as I want, it's infinite availability. The woman starts to get in her head that I can get these 9 and 10 guys. And you could for sex, maybe, but you won't be able to for relationship because those guys probably aren't going to go for you for relationship, but they would have sex with you. And so women start to think, I can get these super high tier men. I really can. And dating apps are even worse for this. And there's science to back that up. But it starts to warp women's sense and it starts to embitter men because men are like, wow, I've sent all these women these "what's up" or "how you doing" or "hey, you're beautiful," da da da. And a lot of times she reads it, no reply. Or maybe she blocks me because I'm a less attractive man. Ooh, these women. And so I'm just curious what you think about that impact on the difference between the male and female psyche. And if you think there's any validity to what I just said, and it's fine if you don't, and please disagree if you disagree with it. That's just my interpretation based on my experience and talking to women who are more attractive and the amount of DMs they get and da da da. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I appreciate hearing your angle of it. It's really interesting to bounce into, and I think that there's an interesting energetic shift happening right now where it used to be that women felt a bit like oppressed in the past. And now the woman is being modeled and guided to feel all powerful, but not to feel powerful from a spiritual perspective, from a heart centered perspective, from a perspective of egoic control. And whenever we have to cling and suction ourselves to this place of egoic control where we need to be the dominating ones because we're so insecure, we create and reap havoc upon humanity. So now within social media, there is this common theme of females thinking they have a lot of control because of the way they look, because social media is a screen-based thing. So how you look is going to play a huge role in how you come across. What's interesting about this is that females, not all of them, but a good amount of females consistently play into the fact that maybe they look good, or maybe they actually don't look good, but their filter is making them look good. And so they play into this power trip. And then when they like age, or the filter's not working anymore because they literally have just changed in their appearance, then they get mad at the world and society. Society doesn't care for the feminine essence because society basically just wants it to look a certain way. And so then you have campaigns where people are trying to turn female empowerment into whatever goes. So it's like, oh, you're fat, you don't take care of yourself, you should be able to be empowered and be idolized by people. And the whole crux of the issue is that idolization was never good for any of us, whether you are someone who looks like a Versace model or whether you are someone who doesn't, who's found power through another field. Idolization is the biggest temptation on the spiritual journey. And this is why many gurus have fallen into the facade of false enlightenment by allowing themselves to be idolized. The biggest trap on the spiritual journey is falling into fame. And this is something the shaman Das Kalas in Italy would say. He would say, beware of fame. It's not that everyone who's famous has messed up. It's more so that it's about intention. If you do this for the intention of feeling complete because you don't feel complete within your soul, then sorry, you've taken the wrong path. You're supposed to do the work inside. And so all of this boils down to no one doing the work within themselves. And then on the masculine side of it, penis or dick pic, I just feel weird saying dick pic, but pictures of like, like mushrooms or whatever they are interesting because if you think of it on a symbolic level, it's a very vulnerable part of the body. And so it's the man or the masculine almost saying on an unconscious level, I don't feel seen for my masculinity. And can you see me? Can this girl on the machine see me? Can, this guy see me or whatever? And so much so that you're desperately sending those pictures to other people. So that tells me that you're desperate to be seen and that you felt very unseen in your life. And that makes me feel sad for you. Not in a shameful way, but like that must be a dark place to be. And I'm not saying this to say that like dick pics are great and they're just an emotional, expression. I think most pictures have an egocentric method to them. There was, I think it was a tribe in Africa that believed every time you had a picture taken of you, you lost a part of the power that your soul possessed. And
Mm.
I'm not trying to say that that's true. I honestly, I don't know, but it's an interesting concept because we put so much focus on photos of us. These photos can only capture an intimate 1 second span of someone's life. Like maybe you looked good in that light, maybe you looked better in this light, whatever. This picture is just a surfaced emblem of a very very deep part of your soul that can never be captured fully on the screen, never. So I think I actually had this idea where, like, if we created a social media website called Soul Book, and you weren't allowed to put up photos or videos, and you can only do writings or voice messages. And I wanted to see if people could benefit in a weird way from that, because you would have to actually feel someone's soul instead of become obsessed with the screen, the image. So my heart, it just breaks for honestly everyone in humanity right now, because females do deserve to be more appreciated for their soul, but
Yes.
they have to stop playing into the egocentric aspect of themselves that wants to look good all of the time, because they're playing into that as well. And men need to like stop just looking at the physicality of a female. So we're both contributing to issues. And then men need to, find another way to have their vulnerability fulfilled rather than sending a dick pic. But they also deserve to be heard by the feminine sphere, by the feminine reality. And what a lot of females don't understand is, and it's so good that I'm female because I really feel like, wow, I can maybe tell my sisters this. Like, men are so deep and complex in their sentient nature. And for centuries, they've had to go to war. They've had to work enslaving 9 to 5 jobs to keep them distracted from their own sentience. While they are warriors and while they are able to fight a battle if needed and to protect if needed, and we appreciate that, they are also very, very sentient and intuitive. And I think that the feminine world right now needs to start paying attention to that. I actually think that we owe that to mankind. And, the men owe us a deeper introspection into our inner universe as well. So hopefully that could help us all eventually, like, get at this from a deeper angle, because it's not just a dick pic or a surface photo, is it? It's so much more.
Wow. Well, that was beautiful. I've never like that actually softened me. I have sent them when requested to women, like when I was in a long distance relationship or separated from my partner or whatever, but I've never, ever, ever done the unsolicited thing. And it boggles my mind. And you actually, I think, solved it, at least some aspect of it. I also think there's a more rapey version, or like
Oh,
a
of course, as
posing like
well.
the old guys
Yes.
in trench coats back in the day kind of. I think there's
True.
that kind of energy too sometimes, but
Mhm.
I'm really fascinated by what you just said, and I've never thought about that before, and I kind of need to digest and think about that. But that was like,
Mhm.
whoa. And it's nice because it softened me. um I am way less compassionate towards men as a general rule than I am towards women.
Mhm.
I'm way less
Mhm.
forgiving towards men than I am towards women, just as a general rule. um
Mhm.
and so that gave me more compassion for a group of men that I generally speaking, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? But now I'm like, huh,
Mhm.
that's interesting. Wow, that was fantastic. So I want to segue into dating apps, and then I want to wrap up with your ideas
Mhm.
on the divine feminine and honor your time. And
Yeah,
thank you so much for coming on today,
thank
Mary Allison.
you.
It's been fantastic.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
dating.
Ian,
Oh, yeah,
before you go, I'm so sorry.
yeah,
I'm gonna just like plug in my computer because I realized
yeah.
the charge is going.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll pause the recording real quick while you do that. Okay.
oh, so great. I'm so sorry. Okay,
No
one
worries.
second.
It's perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So we're back after that brief break, and Mary Allison has gotten resituated. So, Mary Allison, I'll just really quickly try and encapsulate that what I said about dating apps in part one. So sort of, I want to hear your reaction to it. It sounds like you're probably not super familiar with it. I got divorced from my first wife, my son's mother, back in 2012. We split, and just sort of sign of the times or with the times. You know, dating apps were kind of like the way more and more people were meeting. And indeed, I met my second wife on OkCupid. And I recently, after a pretty long hiatus, went back on dating apps and like even got on some of the new ones like Hinge and whatever. And so I did Tinder, OkCupid, Bumble, and Hinge. And I was going to do this other one, but I just was like, I was kind of overwhelmed with just even those four. And it does, the gamification of it is part of what makes it addictive. It feels a bit like Pokemon Go, gotta catch them all. You know, like you feel like you're almost like in a candy store. And I don't mean to say this in like a way, but I mean it is naturally objectifying. It just really is. And so like, you know, I'm like, ooh, you know, she's attractive. And I'm discerning on who I swipe right on. It's usually a woman. I have to feel a real like, whoa, like a level of attraction before I'll swipe on just of attraction. And I'm also very leery of that because I don't know how it works on the female side, but on the male side, there's tons of traps and tricks and trying to steal your money. And like I talked about in part one, like you'll see this woman and be like, whoa, she's gorgeous, she's gorgeous, she's gorgeous, and try like 12 photos up, and you get to photo 11, and it's like this 52-year-old, you know, Vietnamese guy with a 2-inch long cigarette ash, and he's like, eh. And it's on a verified profile, and I'm like, what? Well, what he did was he verified his own face, and then he put up all these pictures of some, you know, Instagram model, whatever, in order to do the scam. And sometimes there'll be women who do that as well. But for the longest time, I was like, why was there some guy from Africa in her pics, like with a weird background? Didn't make sense. And this woman looks like she lives in LA or something, you know?
Definitely.
So I try and be like selective. And for me, the big one is the pokey. And I also want to see someone who's like spiritual, right? Those are the two things. And then attractive is important to me. It is. I in my own journey, I at one point in time with my first fiance, many, you know, it was 20 years ago now, I was wildly attracted to her, and she was very manipulative and used my desire for her and my attraction to her to manipulate me really, really badly, to where I swung in the opposite direction, and a few different times would date women that I found barely attractive enough, and in order to feel more in control of myself and feel like I wouldn't be manipulated as much. But then that bothered me from another angle of I didn't feel as excited and turned on, and I didn't find my partner as desirable, and that started to cause problems in the relationship in its own regard. And so now I've kind of come back and I'm like, no, the lesson wasn't that she was attractive and to go for someone that I'm much less attracted to. The answer is to find someone I'm attracted to who has like, you know, is honest and in integrity and healed and spiritual, and nowadays unfortunately doesn't have the pokey and, you know, all these other like additional layers. But to like go ahead and acknowledge and not subsume my own sexual desire, which is what I was doing for a while there, and then repressing it was causing as much difficulty as like overly indulging in it without discernment, right? And so anyways, on dating apps, I found out there's this thing called the 80-20 rule, and I'm fortunate that apparently I must be in the 20 based on how often I match and have conversations with what are absolutely real women and on occasion get dates. But the 80-20 rule goes like this. It says the top 80% of women based on attractiveness only swipe right on the top 20% of men. Kind of leading into that narcissism, expanded ego. I do think there's a natural tendency in nature, you know, the alpha, the silverback gorilla, or whatever. There is a natural tendency in nature that, of course, men are going to go after an Instagram model too. So it's not like men aren't doing it. The difference is that we're told women don't do this, but it's not true. Women do this, the so-called hypergamy or whatever. I don't really like that term because it takes natural female desires of wanting a provider and a protector, right? So money and height and musculature and masculinity, right, as like the very most surface level, most least deep things that women are attracted to based on biological imperatives. The same way a man is more attracted to a woman who's youthful and has facial symmetry and has like, you know, maybe wider hips or larger breasts or whatever, right? That those kind of things tell a man that this woman will be able to take care of my baby and will produce an attractive offspring that's healthy, right? A woman's like, well, I need a man who can provide for me when I'm very pregnant, and a saber-toothed tiger, right? Because it's all from caveman era, right? Who can protect me from a saber-toothed tiger and will bring home mammoth for me and the baby to eat, because I'm very vulnerable while the baby's a toddler and through the later stages of pregnancy. And so, I mean, it all makes sense. And I don't like the demonizing either aspect of natural masculine and feminine attractions and what we're attracted to. I also think that only looking at those things is very unevolved, and that we need to be looking at integrity and character and spirit. And like you were saying with that soul book thing, there's some kind of dating show where they do that, where they don't show the people what they look like at all. And it gets very interesting results. And then people immediately are like, no, when they actually see the other person. Not always, but very often, right? So the top 80% of women will go for the top 20% of men. And I guess the bottom 80% of men are competing for the bottom 20% of women in terms of getting that match, right? And so I'm fortunate that I'm somewhere in that top 20% apparently, because I do match fairly often, but I usually don't have any kind of traction. But it's super damaging, I think, to both men and women, because women, it moves them towards a lot of the men who are in the more attractive range. The reason they're more attractive is because these men spend an extraordinary amount of time in the gym and maybe are like working to make money so they can have nice clothing and lean up against their expensive car or whatever. These men are trying to maximize those traits. You know, height you can't do much about, but musculature and money are, you have some degree of, especially muscles, you have some degree of control over that. So men will try and maximize that. And then a lot of those men are that dark masculine thing we talked about in part one, where they're the F-boy, player, pickup artist, scumbag guys who are just trying to sleep with the max amount of women. And right now the tables are massively tilted in their direction. I mean, those guys were always getting lots of women, but now it's like it's shooting fish in a barrel kind of situation, because so many people go into online dating, and then because online dating is kind of shallow, they usually, you know, OkCupid at least allows you to write long ass paragraphs, but Tinder and Bumble and Hinge, which is actually slightly better than the other two, it's a newer one, they're really, you know, it's almost like a tweet, like do a tweet about yourself to sell yourself and then some pictures. And so what are people going to focus on? They're going to focus on the pictures. And so I find that it moves women to where they're more likely to invite in the vampire, right? Because they're moving towards that top 20% of guys that they think they can get. And those guys can, of course, lie about who they are, and they do, because these men are manipulative, you know, it's sociopathic in the way they deal with women to get sex. And not all men who are muscular are this way. I have a friend who's just insanely ripped. Homeboy is so ripped, and he inspired me to start like lifting weights and working out a lot more recently. But he's super loyal to his wife, and he has to actually kind of say no to women when he posts. He's worked on his body. He's very proud of the work he's done on his body. He looks amazing. I don't want to be that big, but I would like to be really toned and muscular like him, and just more masculine. And he was telling me he has to fight off women on Instagram and be like, I am not cheating on my wife, I'm not interested. And same thing on Facebook. And he also says he gets a lot of gay male attention, which he definitely doesn't like that as a straight man. But he gets a lot of attention. So just because a guy is muscular and attractive doesn't mean that he's one of these bad men. And I want to be clear about that. Because some, especially men, will try and say that. The same way women will say, oh, that beautiful woman with the perfect hourglass and the large breasts and stuff, of course, she's shallow and narcissist, blah, blah. That's not been my experience at all. I found sometimes very attractive women are extremely deep, and women who are less attractive are quite nasty. And those also don't, you know, the reverse can be true. I've met plenty of people who are less attractive, who are incredible human beings. I'd much rather spend my time around with men and women both. The point is that it creates this thing to where they're really showing that it's extremely damaging to especially men's mental health. But I think women end up getting victimized by it more, because they end up psychologically and via the algorithm migrating towards men who are more likely to be these pickup artist player kind of guys. And so, sorry for the very lengthy dissertation on it, but I do think that this is having a huge impact on the psychology, and all of these in combination are driving men and women apart. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts are on what I just said. I know it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, totally. First off, just from a really simple perspective, I believe the statistical grouping of females who are younger on dating sites would be higher. So from what I've observed, just from researching, there's more youthful people on dating sites. And because of that, when you are a younger female or a younger male, but oftentimes when you're a younger female, you haven't developed the capacity to understand whether or not you're dealing with psychopathic energy and patterns and trends. And so I think the age could play into it a little bit. And what happens is if you have all these, and I'm not on a dating site, so I can't really speak to it too much. So I apologize if I'm off a bit. But if you have all these young females who are looking towards a small demographic of men, and they're specifically choosing based off of looks, which is honestly, I think, what's happening for both men and women these days. And that's something I want to hit on next. But when you have that occurring, you have a whole realm of sabotage occurring where the female starts to believe that all men are bad or evil. And what's happened is these men who maybe are at the height of their tier in regards to physicality, they do have a platter of opportunities to choose from. And so when you kind of say to someone, listen, you have anything you want, you deserve whatever because you look this way, again, you're grooming and breeding characteristics of psychopathy. So maybe you're not actually creating a psychopath, but they're going to have maybe deeper characteristics of it sometimes, not all the time. Especially if they indulge in that dating website from an egoic place. So I think it's creating a very tumultuous divide between the masculine and feminine, where the feminine are going to come out of it feeling really wounded and feeling like they played no role in the wounding. And that's one of the biggest misperceptions is as adults, we actually get to determine who's allowed in our energy field and who's allowed to be held in our hearts. As children, we don't. And I want to make that really clear because I would love to take all the responsibility under the sun for a lot of the situations I've been in as an adult. As a child, it's the parent's job to protect the energy field of the child. It's not the child's job. So two different worlds. And a lot of times what we have here are people going, oh, I was a victim of this like douchebag or something. But the truth is that you maybe sought out that energy. And I've seen men, I've really seen both sides do it completely similarly. Men go after females just for the looks, not looking for what is lying beneath that. And then coming out of it, oh, wow, you know, she's such a this or that. And women are crazy, essentially. I've noticed this trend where men call females crazy and females refer to men as being narcissists. But what's ironic is that it's a crazy narcissistic element within all of us that drives us to just look at one another based off of our body parts. And that segues into the second point I wanted to make, which is our human bodies are mechanisms. They're sort of like these machines that we're able to use as souls to experience this amazing world. And the whole point of being a soul in this world is to not get sucked into this reality in terms of thinking that this reality is all there is, in terms of thinking that your body is all that you are. You could be like a octopus on another planet or like a mermaid somewhere. Like, I don't know what your soul is on different dimensions. And I know that you're so much more than the body that's talking to me. I have appreciation for the human body. It's a temple and it deserves respect and discipline and love and action. But it is not the soul. It is just a tool the soul's able to use to communicate. It's a communication device. So the fact that we've forgotten this and that we think that everyone's communication device is essentially their soul is just another hallmark of the fact that humanity's already sort of fallen to ego consciousness. And so I see it just kind of depleting the life force of both masculine and feminine energies in its own way. And I mean, I think many people know this. You can get to a stage in your spiritual journey where you're pretty intuitive and you can start to intuit the energy of someone instead of just go by their body, because that's a very plain sort of surfaced way to connect to who someone is. And when you start to read energy, you start to realize that there's so much more than what the eyes can see. So that's my comment on it. Yeah.
Oh, I think that that's beautiful. Um, so I think I'm ready to honor your time to wrap up here, and I absolutely want to have you on again to where we can talk about more spiritual concepts. I just really wanted to have a follow up to the one I just did with Roderick Z, to really get actually the question I'm about to ask you, a woman's perspective on all of this stuff. And you come from a very highly evolved place, and I really appreciate that. And it's almost like I almost feel silly asking you some of these more banal questions, but I really like
Oh
the way
no,
that
they're fun.
bringing the higher viewpoint to it. And now I do want to talk about something that's very much the higher viewpoint. I would like to hear, what are your thoughts? How would you define, and how do you experience both yourself and other women? So how do you define the divine feminine, and how do you yourself experience or embody the divine feminine, and how do you experience other women that you feel hold that frequency of the divine feminine? Like, can you
Yeah.
tell me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good way to end this really cool talk we've had. So thank you
Yeah.
for being who you are. You're a very unique and interesting soul, and I've enjoyed
Oh,
learning about your
thank you.
perspectives as well. So
Likewise.
thank you.
Yeah.
So let's start with just energy. The divine feminine is an energetic frequency of receptivity. And a lot of times when I use the words receptivity, people think that I mean surrender and allowance of whatever is to be alive. And that's not the true meaning of receptivity. Receptivity is about co creating with frequencies and energies around you to where you don't have to necessarily direct or manage them, but you just sort of move and groove with them. So, receptivity is this knowing that if you open your heart to maybe source or a higher aspect of your soul, then you can create magic. And I say that because this entire reality, humanity, has forgotten the divine feminine. So it doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman. We as a human species have forgotten the gift of connection to source and the beauty of knowing that there's a deep intuitive drive within you that wants you to basically open up to it. And I've had so many clients and people come to me saying, oh, all men are pigs, or all females are crazy, or I can't get this, I can't get that in my life. And what I say to them is, listen, your energy field, it's not open to the possibility of someone contradicting your statement. And since it's not open to that, you shall receive what you assume is reality. And when we do this, we have a very spearheaded, dark masculine way of approaching reality, where we think that we have to force everything into existence and where we think there's no potentiality for that which we desire. So, divine femininity is about reconnecting to that calming, nurturing essence that is able to open itself to brilliance and genius. And it is through my own inner receptivity that all these like miracles have happened in my life. So that's how I would define divine feminine. Some people would say the divine feminine is rageful, it's Kali, it's angry, and this and that. Um, I mean, I would say that's more of an emotion, and that femininity and masculinity shouldn't be grouped into emotions. The feminine can be upset, the masculine can be upset. We don't have to be like grouping them in that way. It's kind of an immature way of describing it. So that's the divine feminine. And what I've seen is that I'm going to just speak to females because I am a female. A lot of females have forgotten about their power to co create with reality. And they've gone into the business field with their little suits on, their little like masculinized outfits, and they've kind of gone forward with a Hillary Clinton vibe, like I'm gonna show them who's boss and this and that. And I started trading like crypto and stocks a few years ago. So I've been in a very masculine business world for a bit,
Mm-hmm.
not all the time, but I love to just do it as a passive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to realize that like all these females were complaining about how there's no female in this area or there's no female in that area. So I did some research and I found that there was a lady who was hired on like the New York Stock Exchange or something. And
Mm-hmm.
she was one of the first females there. And the managers were saying we wanted more females here, but she was the only one who applied for the position. And I feel like we have to remember like there's a reason that females aren't as interactive in those positions. One could be because they just don't want to do it. I mean, stocks and crypto and stuff like that, it's a very directional sort of experience that requires a lot of focus, a lot of heady brain stuff, which is great if you want to do it. If you don't want to, that's fine as well. But being really focused in the brain is more of a masculine trait. And that doesn't mean that females can't do that. They totally can. But it may be a bit harder or maybe not. I don't want to put limitations on anyone. I bring this up though because I've realized that there's a lot of females who actually don't want to be in the working field in the way they thought. And even that lady who was hired into the stock exchange, I think she ended up making like 12,000 for the year, which is like essentially in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And she might have done better the years after, I don't know. But my point is that we assume that we want the things that men have stepped into just because we haven't done them before. And what the femininity in this world needs to realize is like you're perfect just the way you are. Maybe you do trade stocks and crypto. I do that. I am a female saying I do that and I'm quite happy to do it. Maybe you think that's boring. That's great. Your divine femininity is based off of what your intuition guides you towards. And same for men, their intuition should guide them towards what they want to do. There's plenty of men who would rather not do that business work and who would rather be outside working in the garden or doing artistry or creativity. What we have to realize is that like all of us have a divine soul compass and we need to just allow it to guide us where it guides us. And through this guiding effect, we can bring in this divine feminine receptivity or this divine masculine energy that's a bit more directed and focused and perhaps structured in its modality of existing. So I just, that's how I would sort of sum it up is like it's a complex matter that we ascribe very simple minded theories to when we have like a TikTok video or a clip of someone saying something and everyone freaking out. It's like, no, you're condensing something that's so nebulous and so broad into this concept of reality that's quite simple. So I think the divine masculine, divine feminine, they're both channels and ways to get what you want. With the divine masculine, you can be direct, to the point, focused, structured, even maybe confrontational at times if you need to be. With the divine feminine, you're maybe in a more receptive space. Maybe you're listening a bit more and nurturing. Maybe you're blunt, but if you're blunt, maybe you're blunt from a really graceful place. I can exhibit the divine feminine and divine masculine from within my being anytime I desire. And it might be a bit easier for me at times to exhibit the divine feminine. I'm speaking personally, not for every female, because I do have a female body. And for me, it does feel more natural sometimes to be a bit more in my emotional state or a bit more nurturing. And I have to honor that for me. Maybe other females disagree. And that's totally fine. I mean, really, it's an individual's journey. So I don't know, that's kind of a chunky version of what I'm perceiving in this reality right now. But I do feel sad because I feel like there's a lot of people who've gone into the right realm of politics where they've become very conservative and they've kind of had this weird distorted viewpoint of reality from the past where they think that, oh, females should just stay home and have kids and males should just go to work. And it's like, where did that come from? First off, the men going to work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, what is that good for anyone? I mean, is it? I don't think it's really good. It's enslavement. And then the females just staying home and cooking and cleaning. Maybe some females want to do that, but like I highly doubt it would be every female's path to do that. So I don't understand why people are so quick to think that a version of reality that wasn't good is good. And I would inspire people to realize that evolution occurs when the organism thinks outside of the box and creates an aspect of itself that's new. Like evolution doesn't occur without a new aspect of the organism developing. And that's what we have to do as a species right now is go, maybe this divine feminine, divine masculine thing is much more deep and complicated than we thought. And maybe we'll work it out over time, but maybe it's different for everyone, the way in which they choose to express it. And hopefully that could be helpful for some people, because it's like there's no mad lib to go by or no systemic structure to go by. In fact, that would actually be the dark masculine, to try to systemically structure everything in one way. And then the dark feminine would be to try to chaotically unstructure everything, because the dark feminine is trying to pull everything apart and kind of go crazy. The dark masculine is trying to structure things to a point of emotional numbness where no heart is left. And both are just bad, and we can both do both. But I could just go on forever about it, because it's honestly, it's complicated, and it's something that I'm still learning about a lot in my life. So I apologize if I don't have a direct hit on it, because I think it's so deep. But yeah, those are some thoughts on it.
Oh, that's, yeah, no, I thought those were all fantastic and well said. I just want to comment on one thing you said, and then give you the floor to, like, if you want to do a little wrap up or talk about yourself or any kind of like
Totally.
thing that you want to offer to people, like to come to your website or whatever, so they can get sessions with you, that sort of thing. I think that a lot of people are having an extreme reaction, and understandably so, to this apocalypse. And when I say apocalypse, it doesn't mean the end of the world. It means the great unveiling. That's what it literally means to the ancient Greek. Apocalypse. It's to remove the veil so you can see what's really happening. And with the veil, the falling of the veil is that ending of the glamour magic and the ending of the hiding magic that the faction, the group that I call the Malachians, and you can call them whatever you want, these people who are the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset people, and these people are, they worship dark spiritual energies. They believe in enslavement, Epstein-style harm of children, right? It's ultra pervasive, corruption, just all the like nastiness of the Kali Yuga. It's suddenly right there in your face. And people want to go back to a time to where they were ignorant. They want to like take the blue pill in the Matrix, you know? They want to go back to a time where they didn't know, they just were raising their families, they were paying taxes, and sure, they were blowing up people in Vietnam or wherever, you know, but they didn't have to know any of that. They want to go back to something that wasn't really the way they thought it was back then, and simply cannot exist now. Does that mean that there isn't anything of value to take from prior eras? No. No, there absolutely are things to take. And I think there are certain things to where women, when they're pregnant and raise children, they're going to be home more. They're going to be taking care of the hearth more. That's going to happen to some degree. But that shouldn't be, in my opinion anyways, to the exclusion of women developing themselves artistically, mentally, spiritually, writing blogs, writing books, you know, being in academia, like in all the different things that women can do that are outside of the home. I think that part of the problem is trying to make it about one or the other to exclusion. I mean, there's certain realities that come into play when you have children that require more of your time, but we could also maybe restructure society in a way to where there was more raising children within a community effort.
Totally.
You know, and you know, which is kind of like what we want with schools but don't actually get, you know, so that way women could still have children, still be with their children a fair amount of the time, but not constantly, and just be doing the home and the hearth. But some women want to do that, and that's totally okay. And some men want to go out there and they feel noble. They want to sacrifice themselves and put their nose to the grindstone to be like good men and provide for their families. But do they really? I mean, yes, there's workaholic people, but if you had a choice, would you work 25 hours a week, or would you work 40 or 40 plus if you could have the same level of income? You choose the 25. Come on, dude. You know what I mean? And
Totally.
so there's ways to like bring all those kind of energies into balance. And that doesn't mean that I spend a lot of time. I mean, I don't work 40 hours a week. I work a lot more than it seems. Like if you just watch my videos, you're going to think, oh, Ian does 3 hours of work a week. First of all, editing the video takes way longer than sitting
Yeah.
down and doing the video. I have to think about subject matter. I have to think of a general thing. I always talk
Definitely.
with my guests a period of time before and usually for a while after if they have time, just sort of a debrief and decompress. I think it's important to get in a conversational rhythm beforehand. I also have to think of who I want to have on my show, research people. Like I read a lot of Mary Allison's writings, and you should too. And I do a lot of research for a lot of my shows. I mean, I spend a lot of time reading in order to gain knowledge to be able to express myself. And then, you know, when I do astrology, sure, maybe when I'm doing a chart, I'm doing like 4 or 5 hours of work that I'm charging the person for that. But what they don't see is the 10,000 hours I spent reading and examining charts. And I do mean well over 10,000 hours that I've spent over the past, you know, 20 years in the case of Western astrology, in the past 13 years of current astrology. I spend that, but it's not the same energy as when I was working a 40-hour-a-week job. That was like killing my soul. Whereas this is like, it's expansive. And even though I'm, you know, not technically getting paid for that, it kind of, the money is involved in the case of the astrology for the work I've done in the past to be as good as I am. But I want to spend additional time beyond the 40 hours a week on personal development. I want to go to the gym. I want to work out. I want to meditate. I want to do my angelic magic practice. I want to spend time with my son. I want to spend time with my friends, my family. I want to go out in nature if I can. There's all these things I want to do for personal development that I wouldn't be able to do if I was doing the 40-hour a week slaving away job that I did for 17 years. And the cost to me is that I don't make as much money as I could. I make good money, but I don't make as much money as I could if I took my talents to a 9-to-5 job of some sort. And I've been offered that a few times to where I could get jobs where I'd be paid a lot more money, but I know it would just loop me in back into that soul killing thing. And it's unfortunate because I would like to have more money for a variety of reasons, of course, but I also feel like I'm building towards something in what I'm doing. And by doing all this personal development stuff, that it's opening energetic gateways of abundance, you know? And so likewise, I'm not a woman, and so I can't speak to that too much. But I think that there's a way for women to have children, have that intimate, close connection with their children, and also still do like a lot of personal development stuff. I think it's possible, although I do think it requires women having the support of extended family, maybe other men and women who can help with the child, things that we've lost over the decades that actually is more of a traditional thing. But I think people are really feeling reactionary and want to just swing back to like conservative Christianity is something I see a lot of in the US. And I understand it when you're faced with a bunch of satanic psychopaths who are trying to take over the damn planet and take everything. You're like, well, what do I know that's against that? Conservative Christianity. And so you want to reflexively retrench in the thing. But the problem with that is we can't go back to that. The flip side is part of what's given what the Satanists are doing is they're in a coagulate state. It's solve et state, excuse me. They're solve et coagulate means to dissolve and then to reform. That's not quite what it means, but in Latin, and it's an alchemical phrase. And right now, the powers that be, both the Luciferian faction and the Malachian faction, and there's also people who are like us who are trying to bring in the energy of that most high energy, that golden age energy, as we try and evolve humanity towards that. Sammy and Paul Tisdale and others, people I've had on my show have that energy. We are not the dominant factions, though. It really is this tension between the Malachians and the Luciferians. And they both, for very different reasons, are trying to dissolve the current structure. The Malachians want to create a frozen in time, forever frozen, total top down,
Mhm.
cradle to grave enslavement forever. Orwell's boot on the face of humanity forever. That's what they want to
Mhm.
make. They're going to fail. They will
Mhm.
fail. But they're dissolving the current structure in order to implement a nightmarish one. And the Luciferians want to dissolve the current structure to put in a more enlightened, but still a false light energy, right? That we discussed in part one. But we have to understand that we can't go back.
Mhm.
We cannot go back. It's a stream, and when you step in that stream and then you step out of it, you step back into the stream, it's not the same stream actually. And likewise, we're moving into something and we can't go back. Does that mean that we should just abandon the family unit altogether? No. It means we're going to need to take what worked in prior eras and bring that forward. And then we're going to have new creativity with some of those structures in place of that did work. Let's keep that, but let's
Definitely.
improve upon it. Let's change it. And you have to be careful, of course, because the nasty powers that be are trying to use this period of time to reform things in their image. And so we have to be vigilant to that. But we have to, I believe, understand that we can't go back. We can't go back to 1950s America. It is gone. It is already gone. And you cannot reconstitute it. The economy is different. It's multipolar world. World War II didn't just happen. People forget 1950s. All of Europe was obliterated, guys. There was nothing. The Marshall Plan had to completely rebuild Europe. Japan was devastated. They got nuked, for crying out loud. China was pretty messed up. India was essentially a backwater. The Middle East, they hadn't really developed their oil fields a ton. The US was it, baby. It was it. It was the only place on earth that had manufacturing capacity. We can never go back to that time. And you shouldn't want that anyway, because that's very jingoistic and entitled to think that you should have that level of wealth and dominance over the rest of the planet. It's not going to happen. And part of those structures we had in place back then were an artifact of that level of economic boom that occurred in that. We can never have that again. We also were not we're not pre-1950s. We're not 1940 America, where 70% of people live on farms. Like, really? 70% of people currently in cities are going to go out and take land owned by Bill Gates? Hey, I'm not opposed to that. And start a homestead. I'm not opposed to that per se. I certainly don't want it in Bill Gates' hand. But realistically, are we really going to have everybody who lives in the city right now? Do you really want to go out and wake up at 4:30 in the morning and milk cows the way my dad did in the 40s in Montana and early 50s? If you think you do, go try it and get back to me. That doesn't mean that maybe you do want to have a farmstead. I'm just saying it's unrealistic to think that we're going to go back to any of these templates of the past, because we've moved on. So what are we going to go back to, the Ottoman Empire or the Roman Empire, like Attila the Hun? Like, it's silly. And just because it happened within living memory, the 1950s or whatever, which seems to be the template they want to go back to, it's gone. We have to make something new, and we can take good things. We can take that innocence of the 1950s, of where we didn't have this awful stuff they have in the public schools. We didn't have people, and I need to watch it myself, swearing all the time and over sexualizing of everything, and all this stuff that's nasty that's in modern times. We can have some of that good quality, but we can't go back. It's gone. It is gone. What we can do is we can take what worked, bring it forward, and then use our creativity to form something new. There's certain inherent laws in being male and female that are just natural. Men are protectors and providers. That's natural. What does that look like, though? That's where the fungibility, that's where the creativity comes in. Women are nurturing, and they have the beauty of they're able to create a human being within their body, create an energetic gateway that opens so a soul can come through, and the man's key energy can help open that gateway within the woman so soul comes through. That's beautiful. Nurturing that baby, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's never going to go away. But does it have to mean that the woman is a 1950s housewife? No. No. So anyways, that's my piece on it. Do you want to have a final closing thing you want to say, and then we'll end there?
Oh yeah, there was just one last thing I was gonna hit off of what you said.
Yeah.
In psychology, when we heal, we go back to certain aspects of our timeline of our life.
Mm-hmm.
And we maybe experience things that felt very pure to us or beautiful. So maybe when you were a child, you felt like you could laugh more or you felt more pure. And so when you heal, you go back to those moments to sort of reincarnate them into this present moment to allow them to be invited in again. You don't, however, go back to such a degree that you digress and you end up on the floor unable to walk and you must crawl again and now you can't make any food or take care of yourself. That wouldn't be stability in psychology. That would be a loss of stability and a sign that someone's not perhaps growing in the most healthy way. So we must realize this in regards to the collective timeline. We can take different areas of reality that assisted us, but we have to be aware that if there was a golden age for us to go back to, none of this would have been happening to begin with. Does that make sense? Like there wouldn't be these dark factions working against one another if we already remembered and had within the closeness of this timeline a golden age. We wouldn't be here now because we wouldn't have been easily corruptible. And unfortunately, our egos were, and that's okay because we're learning through that. So I just want to mention that there's so many different layers, and there's females out there who can do incredible things with wealth, and yet they can also be very nurturing and very sentient towards the children. There's men out there who are very good with children and nurture, and they can also be very good with wealth or providing. There's just so many beautiful ways we can integrate these realities as long as it feels pure to the spirit. I think is the most important thing. As long as what you're doing isn't driven by a need to control or over dominate, but by a natural source from within. So that's all I wanted to add, and this has been delightful.
Yeah, wonderful. And so and I'm going to put this down below in part one as well, but Mary, you have Mary Allison, you've said several times that you provide sessions for clients. Is that something, I mean, I don't even know if that's something you want to offer to the viewer, but if you did you want to tell about anything that you want to share in terms of your, I don't know, ironically, social media or any other ways that viewers who are interested in interacting with you more on a professional basis? Like, is there anything?
So I'm just finishing my website. It's intuitivesessions.com actually.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever want to visit some of the personal work I do with people one-to-one, feel free to go there. It won't be up for another week, but this podcast probably isn't going up tomorrow, is it?
Nope, it's not going to show.
Okay.
This podcast may be happening right when you launch, and I'll put a blurb about that then. Let me know. Send me a message, and we'll coordinate
I
that.
will. Yeah, so hopefully it's up by the time this is out. If not, it'll be up soon. And yeah, you can find me on Facebook under Mary Allison, or on Telegram, or on Instagram. And I'll just give Ian the links for down below. So thank
Yeah,
you, Ian.
fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on, Mary Allison. I really
Thank
want to have
you.
you on. I want to have you on again to where we can talk, just focus more on the spiritual. I just really
Mhm.
wanted to actually bring in a woman who, like I say, has that divine feminine energy that you embody so well, and to
Thank you.
comment on what I had talked about in part one, which in a certain way is banal, right? Because there's the physical aspect of male female relating, which is how we both exist, right? But there's also you know, on top of this mundane layer, there are these higher layers that you've been so beautiful at illustrating
Thank you.
for the viewer. And thank you so much. But I would love to have you back another time to talk about other things.
Thank you. I would love to come back and chat as well. You are like an encyclopedia of knowledge, and it's very fascinating to
Thank you.
hear from you. I love it. I love it.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And viewer, thank you so much for watching. And if you got this far, I always forget to say it, at least I type it afterwards. If you enjoyed and you watched this far, first of all, please check out Mary Allison's stuff. It's amazing. I'm not just typing it up. Go read it for yourself. You'll see And second of all, if you enjoyed this, please hit like, subscribe, and share. And if you're feeling like you want some extra guidance in your life, then you can reach out to me. And I do natal and Navamsa charts, especially in Vedic astrology. I also do synastry charts where I analyze compatibility, interestingly enough, between generally male and female relating. Although I've had clients who are gay, so it's certainly not a heterocentric. It works regardless of the genders of the people involved. But so I can do synastry, which analyzes romantic and sexual compatibility and also long-term living compatibility. I do natal charts, which is the first 40 years of life. And then Navamsa charts is the second 40 years of life. That's Vedic astrology only that has that Navamsa. I do also do Western astrology, although there's many Western astrologers, and Vedic astrology is somewhat more of a unique niche, and it speaks to my soul more for whatever reason. And it really helps you look at the unfolding karmas in your life and being able to see what planetary energies are really coming forward, and how your soul's imprint of when you take that first breath as an infant, how your soul solidifies energetically in a certain way. And to a certain degree, some amount of your destiny is written for the important lessons that your soul is going to learn. And so in difficult times like these, maybe a little extra guidance would be in there. I also do spiritual counseling. And I teach people Angelic Magick, which to me has been some of the most profoundly transformative work that I've ever done. It's not so much magic to get real world results, although that does tend to come. It's more magic about personal development, working through your shadow, integrating masculine and feminine, and otherwise just developing yourself. I feel like I've done more self-development with the angels in the past 9 months, in some ways, than I have in the past 9 years, despite doing a lot of work without it. The angels have really added rocket fuel to that process. So if you're interested in that, you can find my stuff below. And thank you so much for watching. And thank you again, Mary Allison. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I look forward to having you again. All right. Bye.
Thank you, Ian.
Bye.